e pe e moera. E runga ua koe tō tupuna vai ne tai o ora. E tai o ora.
Looking at today, Cook Islands continues to face economic challenges from recovering from COVID to reducing our dependence on foreign aid. Based on what you saw in the 90s, what advice would you give today's leaders as they make tough decisions for the future?
My two words are fiscal prudence. If you're running government in a fiscally prudent way, that means running it within your means, based on the revenue that you're generating from taxes and the size and diversity of your private sector. Those are important elements, and you have to practice this fiscal prudence constantly. It's not something, I'll do it this year and then I'll blow the budget next year, or live outside the budget guidelines or whatever. The good thing for the Cook Islands is that you're through the Ministry of Finance and Economic Management, has consolidated those rules so they're intertwined between the budgeting and the economic management part. So there are fiscal rules in place, budget rules in place, that help, that are not based on political decisions or just somebody's, even an ADB consultant coming in and sticking their finger in the wind and seeing where things are going, but based on more academic, or I don't even want to say academic, on better tools to assess where you're at and what you're able to bring in terms of revenue and to spend. So those rules and processes are very important to follow. So those include, your medium-term expenditure frameworks, your, looking at your cash reserves, having different accounts where you're saving money for disaster assistance and economic stabilization. When you have budget surpluses, you save during the fat years to spend in the lean years, right?
Yeah.
And that goes back to that 90s. You had some fat years, but you didn't save. You had everything going out the door in either public sector salaries or in loan payments. So you weren't saving, and then a crisis hits and you had nothing. So you left yourself open to the crisis, which caused these problems.
So looking at where we are today with our tourism, with our agriculture, what are your thoughts on where you think our country is moving into, and what you would suggest we do to sustain our livelihood, our culture, to keep our people living at home?
That's a challenging question that need to be asked to new generation sitting at home and watching this. How can we get these people to be interested and into coming to grow? I mean, the market is there, the opportunity is there, the money is there, but it's waiting for your hard work and your labor and your sacrifices to come and take up the challenge. Because in the end, the outcome is we all need to eat, and we need to feed our tourists. And we need to feed ourselves, food security, all those are very important. And we can never go away from this. So what we need is come up and work hard and take up the challenge and the money is there.
We interviewed Mike the other day, and he, we were talking about the no building taller than a coconut tree, which is Papa Arapati's policy that he had in place. So even though his vision was for tourism, there was always thinking about our environment, thinking about our people. And Mike mentioned that there was plans, we had a foreign investor interested in O'Otu, but he said he just didn't want our people, our family, to be over the fence looking in, at their own land. And so, so as the mayor, like, it's really good to see you carrying on that same vision and caring for our people. And what other aspects would you like to share with us about your plans?
Okay, well, I would love to say they're mine, but actually there's been a number of groups of people, and interestingly, mainly women, who are really motivated on Aitutaki, and they have since 2016, 2019, 23, and then 24, and now 25, we're updating this Community Sustainable Development Plan, which is incredible. The foundation work that they've laid is just amazing, and hats off to them for the work they've done. And it's just disappointing that previous administrations haven't implemented it, but I'm just looking at this plan and just blown away by it. So it's very comprehensive. It has some very clear goals. And so, the current council have adopted that, and we're planning to implement it alongside our lagoon management plan. So the lagoon of Aitutaki is the most important lagoon in the Cook Islands. This is the lagoon that sells tourism. Everybody looks at that picture and they go, we're going there. And then they land in Rarotonga and they say, I want to go to that beach. And then we say, 45 minutes north and you're there. So, so from the council's perspective, the sustainable development is really, really important, especially within our tourism, which is our key industry. Also on the lagoon, we're looking to, for safety's sake, we're looking to regulate and license all of our operators, and working closely with marine resources. We have a plan where we are providing, with the license, we're providing fixed moorings. And in addition to that is coral gardens. And so basically what we're saying to them is, to be custodians, the manatiak. And so these are your areas of the lagoon. And this way, instead of everybody following around each other and jumping on Te King's mooring, then what they're doing is we're spreading the load of our visitors across the whole lagoon. In return, the tour operator is also required to keep that area clear of paramia.
I despair at times about us really seeing the potential in so many things in our environment. I've spent a lot of time in the last few years, last 20 years, looking at even the outer islands, what we could do, what potential economic things are there. There are. In my home, in the Northern Group, I really do see there are a lot of things we could do to improve our life there, our standard of living, based around our water, our sea, our water and our sea and our seafood resources. But we may be too late, because the biggest problem now I see in any of these is depopulation. There is nobody there to do it. If we want to develop any of the outer islands, you see, there's a very good example. The only one we could point to that showed that we can actually grow an island's economy, and where the economy grew and the number of people grew, and that was Manihiki during the heyday of the pearl industry. Now, we grew that from, Papa Tekake and some of the local people started pearl farming. Someone from Tahiti came in and helped us. But then Manihiki people from New Zealand and Australia came back and joined in the pearl farming. They came back with a little bit of money a little bit of experience in business and discipline in their life, and motivation. And that's how that industry grew. It was the people coming back in who boosted that economy. And the number of people grew from about 200 to about nearly 800.
Wow, that's
The only example in the Cook Island that happened. So if there is opportunity on these islands that people in New Zealand and Australia see, if we want to grow these islands now, we have to go and talk to them.
We have a look at, debt, managing debt, and that's been a big focus for the Cook Islands, and some real progress has been made. What kind of strategies have worked best to keep the country on a stable path, and how do we find the right balance between growing the economy and staying financially responsible?
We have some fiscal rules and stuff that keep us sort of in check to how much we can borrow and lend. And we also have the medium-term debt strategy, which I'm sure everybody's really excited about and has read it cover to cover. It's available on the MFEM website. Teo Tilulio and I put that together, and particularly the work that Teo has put together over the years managing debt here for 20 odd years. It has a few sort of key guidelines around simple things like our preference is to borrow in New Zealand dollars, so we're not exposed to foreign exchange risks. If we can, we'll borrow in fixed interest rates rather than floating ones. Those kind of simple things that mean that we know what we're going to pay, we know what our obligations are, and they won't move that much. We're also pretty conservative on our debt front. We generally, COVID aside, we take out debt for particular projects. With our fiscal rules, we tend to run operating surpluses or small operating surpluses, and we take out debt for capital projects. So whether that's, in the past, it's been upgrades to the port, it's been to the National Stadium, all these kind of things like that, where it's a particular project that will have benefits over a long period of time. Where places can get into trouble, and we try to avoid this, is taking on debt for run-of-the-mill everyday operations. Because the benefits are right there at the time, but you're paying for it for the next 10, 15, 20, whatever, how many years.
Yeah, and then so when we have a look at our debt ratio in comparison to other countries, we're in a pretty good position, right?
We are. So by the end of this financial year, in the supplementary budget's just out, so we estimate that our net debt to GDP ratio will be about 30%, which that puts us lower than New Zealand or Australia, considerably lower than some other of our neighbours around the region. Fiji's much closer to 100%. I think it's 80-something% at the moment. And even larger countries. So the US is well over 100%.
Wow.
Japan is well over 200%.
Wow.
Our debt position in terms of levels is quite manageable.
Yeah. And then so when we have a look at the Sheraton, so we had debt of 120 million, and the loans, they weren't fixed loans, and they were also in foreign currency. So that was something that we couldn't control, and then it just ballooned out of control.
And at the time, our size of our economy would have been, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing less than $200 million. So we're talking debt over 50% of GDP.
Wow.
One loan, very risky loan.
Yeah.
On not great terms.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest economic opportunities and challenges for the Cook Islands and for young people who want to get involved in shaping, our country's future economy? What advice would be helpful for them?
I think for young people, it's the challenge is also the opportunity. So our strength, both our strength and our sort of weakness sometimes is our size.
Yeah.
But if you're young and you're learning economics or you're interested in economics, take that to be your advantage, because you can come in, work in the ministry or work in any kind of field really, and get exposed to far more interesting stuff. Get thrown in the deep end a little bit, to be fair, but you get the chance to do things that are way more interesting than getting sort of pigeonholed in a small area of, say, Treasury New Zealand or something like that. And we should sell that much more strongly than we do.
Yeah.
You can come in and work, talk about EPD, but you can come into EPD fresh out of uni or fresh out of school, and we can have you in front of cabinet.
And so when we look at our Cook Islands negotiation team, they are known as being some of the youngest in international discussions. How are these teams put together?
That's only recently our negotiation teams have become, young Cook Islanders, which is also another amazing thing, because when you go to these international negotiations and you look at the delegations, they're all, a lot older than us. So when we walk into a room, they think we're a bunch of interns. And then when we speak, and then that's when they're mind blowing. And to be able to have, you know, as a Cook Islander, I feel very proud to see, you know, other fellow Cook Islanders at such a young age in their fields being able to be at this international stage and represent our country, but also the Pacific Islands as well as small island developing states. And I think that's a testament to, you know, just us as Cook Islanders. We've always punched above our weight, and to see the younger generation coming through and being able to lead these discussions as well is something truly amazing. And it just shows the level of opportunities that are out there for our Cook Islanders to thrive in. And as mentioned, it's just been in the recent years where our delegations have been getting younger. And that's because we have a lot of Cook Islanders currently in this space and in other spaces that have the potential to do more. And they're showing the willingness and eagerness and passion to be in these spaces and represent their countries as well as broader island developing states. So it's really good that we have, you know, those coming through, and I hope that that's even more inspiring to the next generation as well, to keep on that same path and have that same momentum.
But it's also a testimony as well for those that are in management to actually see the potential, but then also give those opportunities instead of just taking it up. You know, they've got the experience, and so just to keep it with those that are well versed. Instead, they're looking at building up the younger generation, and which is really good to see.
And that's exactly the point that, you know, I think we want to show is that, you know, we're here to support you and your growth. And just like me, I was mentored by 4 amazing ladies. I am a product of them. So these young people who are in your ministry learning from you are going to be products of you, and so we should nurture that and help drive them to be better leaders for our future.
Yeah, especially given, you know, we've got the highest depopulation figures as well, and so we're having to rely heavily on those that have stayed in country, and so just building them up is just the best thing to do. No, that's great. And then, so how do you see MFEM's role in contributing towards sustainable development aspirations, and what are some of the exciting projects on the horizon? Is that something that you can talk about?
Yeah, definitely. MFEM plays a key role as a central agency, but also as the Ministry of Finance. A lot of people also think that, you know, as a Ministry of Finance, we're only worried about the money. But we're not. Our policies and procedures touch on, you know, other aspects such as cultural and social. So when we're designing our projects, we have to ensure that there's a balance. So now we're seeing more policies come through that are just not looking at, you know, economics, but also environmental and social governance. And that's key for our projects in order to meet our sustainable development goals. And some of the initiatives that we've got coming up are truly, you know, innovative and locally led adaptation to climate change, which is something, again, to be proud of, because not every country does this approach. They're very much focused on top down, where we're bottom up and we're trying to meet the needs of our people and achieve our national priorities. Some of these programs, we've already got one under our belt with the Green Climate Fund, and that's a $12 million project focusing on increasing and strengthening our health sector at all levels, so community groups, national as well as regional, ensuring that we also build the capacity of our Pacific Island people. We've also got another project coming up which looks at how we can increase at the household level the preparedness and strength of everyone's households or businesses. And this project is still in development, but we're trying to make it innovative and more streamlined so that our people have the direct access to these international climate funds without having to go through all the hoops and loops as MFEM does just to get these necessary resources.
So, Garth, looking back at 2011 to now, if you were talking to a young Cook Islander today, how would you explain what economic resilience actually means for our country?
This is quite an important question. I remember probably in my whole life, I probably had 3 pieces of advice from as I was growing up that I never forget. So this is an opportunity to provide advice that I hope many young people will never forget.
Yeah.
And I've jotted them down. And first of all, it's about having self-awareness, national self-awareness, you know, like having a young people. Resilience is about who are you, you know, knowing about our country, our cultures, our cultures, our capabilities and opportunities, the threats we face, and how we should make decisions in addressing them. It's like we need to have a broader and common understanding of those issues, and I feel it should be taught at school. I think at school there's too much, I constantly hear this, where we hear the history of other countries and we never hear the history of our own country.
I agree.
So I think we need a bit more customization in our education system. I think we need to be comfortable that we have the knowledge to make the right decisions about our countries and not being unduly subject to the interest of outsiders. We need to have the capability of educating ourselves and forming our own opinions, because this is our country. You know, I don't like outsiders coming in and telling us what to do. Okay, you know, we are the people who care most about this country. We live here, we have a democratic process to make these decisions, and we should all strengthen our wisdom to effectively participate in the decision making. I'm going to say that every young person out there who wants to live and commit to this country should learn about this country, should learn how to participate in decision making. And some of them are going to put their hands up and be politicians, and some of them are going to become public servants, some of them are going to be entrepreneurs, but they need to understand this country. One, to support it, but at the same time to live off it and live part of it. So we need to be wiser, we need to think for ourselves. I'll go back to this. Economic resilience reflects the will of the people. Okay, the democratic process supports the will of the people, and the role of MFEM is to provide the necessary public financial management and economic guidance to guide implementation. Every 4 years we have an election. In the preceding the election, there's a campaign where parties get up and say, this is what we want to do. Our voting public needs to be, is this going to work? Is this good for us? Does it preserve what we want for the future of this country or not? So they need to become educated. We need to be agile. As the world changes around us, we need to be able to adapt quickly so that we can continue to maintain our national well-being. You know, we've got to be smarter. We're smaller. We face more threats. We're a small island state, which means no one cares about us except us. You know, I've done research on small island economies. There's nothing out there because it's not important to the researchers and the universities. It's important to us. We should be doing that ourselves.
That's awesome. That's an amazing answer. And then so graduating to a higher income sounds like a big achievement, but what does it actually mean for our people? Does it make life better or harder for everyday Cook Islanders?
Okay. First, I'll open with ODA graduation. So graduating to a higher income country sounds like a great achievement. Okay, what it means is all the grants and concessionary finance we used to get from development partners drops away. And it's based upon rules made by the OECD decades ago on the other side of the world. And countries like us had no input into ODA graduation. So I think it's archaic, I think it's out of date, and I think it's stupid. And I call it nonsense when I discuss it regionally and anywhere else. I call it nonsense. The world's changed, and there's the understanding, particularly with climate change and the threats to small island states, that these archaic rules are no longer irrelevant. But in the meantime, we continue to be penalized. You know, in fact, about 3 months ago, OECD reached out to us and said, we're reviewing the assessment process to ODA, and we'd like your input. And then I went back and I said, I accept the assessment process. I don't know what good our input's going to do about it. You should be looking at the criteria. You know, I said, you look at the criteria, I think it's out of date. It needs to be amended. So last week I got a response and they said, look, thank you very much for your input. And we do realize the committee agreed that we do need to look at the criteria. So but it's slow. And, you know, like if I didn't say it, maybe they wouldn't reconsider it. And yet everybody accepts the world's changing, you know, and the assessment criteria has to change. We're all recognizing we've got a vulnerability, multi-dimensional vulnerability index that's also in development. We've got the special circumstances of SIDS. I think that some development partners are working on as well, more accepting to as well. How's this impacted our people? I don't think there's been much impact, particularly because our people are not at the forefront of this engagement around ODA graduation. What it's meant for Ministry of Finance, Foreign Affairs, maybe OPM, is that as government agents, our sort of negotiation becomes more, you know, we become more driven in negotiating for support, because we're not like the Pacific Island countries that are our neighbors who will get $40 million. A new wharf, $40 million granted. I mean, Tuvalu got, about 6 months ago, Tuvalu got a domestic shipping ferry, 29 million Australian dollars, just like that. You know, us, if I want a ferry, I need to scramble around, I need to get some grants, I need to raise debt financing to get something similar. So it means we become more, not desperate, more pushy, you know, we work harder. Yeah. So, and again, the fruits of our hard work, then, particularly in the shipping, domestic shipping space, we're going to get a boat. It's not going to be the $29 million boat that Tuvalu got. It's going to be a lot less, and we've had to work harder to get it. Yeah. Which means I'm, you know, I think, okay, I worked hard to get this. I mean, I need to work hard to make sure it's operated and maintained properly. And I think that's one of the flip sides of ODA graduation. If you work harder to get something, then there's a tendency to work hard to keep it, to operate and maintain it properly, because it's hard earned. Yeah. It's not a freebie.
And so you've been part of some tough negotiations with international partners. What's one lesson you've learned about standing strong as a smaller island state, and when you're dealing with much bigger countries and institutions?
You've accompanied me on some levels. Okay. Yeah. I work on several levels, and I got many tools, and I research and I watch, you know, eminent people who do this work. So I walk into a negotiating room without any fear, shame, fear or embarrassment, or fear of looking or sounding stupid. Yeah. I just park that at the door, okay? I ignore the power imbalance between parties. I visualize myself and the country as a client or customer. I'm not a recipient. You know, I walk in there, you're not the donor and I'm the recipient. You're not the bigger country and I'm the small country. You're here because I'm here. I'm your client. You want to do business with me? Let's do business. So when you go, it's creating this moral ascendancy. And there's nothing holding you back to do a deal. I do my homework. I know the topic that we're dealing with. I know it better than the other party. I mean, that's a psychological truth. Yeah. I know this more than you. When you do your opening statements, is you grab the first opening statement. So you start describing the challenge and you build in the parameters of thinking and discussion. Now, if you do it carefully, this person doesn't even know you've done it. But you design the parameters of discussion and negotiating. You describe what a win is going to look for him and you. Yeah. So once you do that psychological preparations, you're in a pretty good space. You have to be able to articulate your what you see as a win, but at the same time, understand what the other party wants. So again, it creates this opportunity like, well, it's not, I don't even like to talk about a middle ground. I like to win. Yeah. But it's always like you've got an idea, what's a win and a loss and what's the middle ground going to look like. So you know, like if you're both in a position to win from it, man, the more likelihood you're going to get to that position. So I do that. The other thing I do, and I'm pretty famous for it, I'm always frank and candid. And sometimes, most of the times, I'm diplomatic. Yeah. But, you know, like every time I go on this trip, I realize, you know, like it costs a lot of money to put me in that room. Okay, there's quite often it's funded, but often it's not funded, which means I take taxpayers. I get a taxpayers pay my ticket, so I'll fly from here to Auckland. I stay in Ibis Budget Hotel. I fly economy.
Yep.
From Ibis Budget Hotel, I fly to Fiji. Most of my work's there. I fly economy. I stay in a hotel there. I rock into that room, and I do my business. And I get back on the plane, and I come back here. And I always like to say that I've given public value on public taxpayers' money. And when you do this with that sort of, I feel driven, I feel privileged, I feel determined. When you go into negotiations like that, I feel supported. The likelihood of getting what you want is it's there. You know, it's not. I'm not participating. I'm in there to win. So it's all psychological. It's psychological, but that's what creates, success.
Tuki tuki teni teni tarai ara ko tō mate kino mō. Te kere ti te rutuki mate kaka ari ki te matai o. Ua pōkia i te kārere. Pōpongi ori ori e taiti moketa, te taiti moketa. E rei rātu e tūtakai ato ke o.